Hey everybody, welcome to the third week of class. Making a short video today to talk a little bit about our discussion board from last week and how that can help you with your writing this week, and also to point out a couple specific places in our textbook reading from last week that can also help in your writing of your first essay, your literacy narrative this week. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with some of the discussion posts. Now, not everybody has had a chance to respond, but I did jump in and do some responses myself because I want to point out to you how using other literacy narratives, the ones we read last week, can really help us write a stronger literacy narrative ourselves. So reading closely, reading carefully, picking out those passages that really stand out to us can actually help make us better writers. So as the textbook talks about, being a better writer happens from being a better reader. So I'm going to pull up just a couple posts here. I'm going to start with Erica's. Thank you, Erica, for your post. And you'll see my response. Erica chose her 3 quotes. And what I wanted to point out is that many people notice that these authors often used everyday language, everyday situations, everyday events that created real power in their writing. So many people connected and resonated with this in some way in their own lives. And so I wanted to point out to you that oftentimes it doesn't take some big fancy words or some big major experience, that it is the everyday daily language, it's the daily experiences that can create really powerful writing and really powerful connections to your reader. So I'm going to show you this one where Erica pulls the quote from Sherman Alexie. I was 3 years old, a Spokane Indian boy living with his family on a Spokane Indian reservation in eastern Washington state. We were poor by most standards, but one of my parents usually managed to find some minimum wage job or another, which made us middle class by reservation standards. I had a brother and 3 sisters. We lived on a combination of irregular paychecks, hope, fear, and government surplus. All right, so in my response to Erica, I point out that Sherman Alexie pairs irregular paychecks and government surplus, which is, the reality for many people, with the concepts of hope and fear in the same sentence. So everyday events, everyday occurrences, hope, fear, really big. Okay, so just that juxtaposition. Same thing here with Frederick Douglass's quote. I went one day down to the wharf of Mr. Waters, and seeing 2 Irishmen unloading a scow of stone, I went, unasked, and helped them. When we had finished, one of them came to me and asked me if I were a slave. I told him I was. He asked, "Are ye a slave for life?" I told him that I was. The good Irishman seemed deeply affected by this statement. He said to the other that it was a pity so fine a little fellow as myself should be a slave for life. He said it was a shame to hold me. They both advised me to run away to the north. Okay, so going back to the beginning of that statement, here are just 2 guys unloading stone on a pier, completely everyday action, yet it's paired with this concept of slavery. Really, really powerful. So in your own writing, think about how can you pair everyday realities, daily language that we would use, with some really big, powerful concepts or ideas or feelings or realities that really integrate those 2 and connect them. All right, nice work, Erica, picking those out. Let's go back to the forum and I'll show you a couple others here. Let's take a look at Jade's. All right, so her 3rd quote is from Sherman Alexie. It's, I throw my weight against their locked door. The door holds. I am smart. I am arrogant. I am lucky. I am trying to save our lives. Now here, this is really powerful stuff that Sherman Alexie does, and I know other people picked that quote out too. He repeats, I am, I am, I am, I am. Now typically in writing, we're probably taught Don't repeat things over and over. Same sentence structure, very simple, simple sentence structure, but feel the power in doing that, okay? So thinking through, as long as you're repeating intentionally, as you're using it as a writing technique, it can be really powerful. And look at the words he chooses: smart, arrogant, lucky. We don't often pair those words together. Okay, so think about how can you use simple sentence structure, how can you use repetition to create a really powerful expression of your experience in your literacy narrative. All right, let's take a look at one more here. We'll go down to Maria. And Maria picked a quote from Malcolm X. I'll read that real quick. I have often reflected upon the new vistas that reading opened to me. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. And as you'll read in my response to Maria's choice of quotes, it's this mixing of past, present, and future that is really powerful. And he does it in such a short frame of just a couple sentences. Okay, he knew right there, past tense or present, that reading had changed him forever, which is the future. As I see it today, present tense, the ability to read awoke, past tense, inside me. Okay, so that kind of folding and melding together, past, present, and future, could be a really strong technique in your closing. So think about how you might use that. I'm going to point out just one more, because such great stuff in this week's discussion so far. This is from Robert, and it is the one about my father loved books, and since I love my father with an aching devotion, I decided to love books as well. Okay, so our literacy narrative often has other characters, other people that have been influential. Thinking about how you describe not just who they are, but also your relationship with them, an aching devotion to his father. So now we know that simply through that, he's going to want to do a lot of what his father has done. So think about not only how you describe the people, but also your relationship to them. Oh, one more, sorry, I'm just so excited about these. Okay, Rafa chose the one from Sherman Alexie about the words inside a paragraph work together for a common purpose. And Rafa notes that this is also the way Sherman Alexie looks at life. And so that is a metaphor. So hopefully you recall metaphors and similes. They're a way to make comparisons or analogies in our writing. And that's another great technique to use in our literacy narrative. All right, so just a few things I wanted to point out from your discussion board. Thank you for all of your work on that. For the last couple minutes, I just want to visit the book, Chapter 6, and point out a couple specific pages that can be helpful. On page 100, at the very bottom, it talks about planning your narrative. The problem that students have is that because they were there, they forget to leave out some of the details because it's already in your brain. You experienced it. It's your memory. But remember, your reader wasn't there. They didn't experience it. And so when you're planning out your narrative, the textbook suggests keep asking yourself who, what, where, when, what, how, and why. And so those are the basic questions, but they also help us to pull out the details and make sure that we're sharing those with the reader, that nothing is assumed. Okay, it's the imagery, it's the details, it's the relationships, it's the titles of the books and the names of the teachers and what they looked like and where you were and the classroom space you were in. All of those details help create that experience that we, your readers, can see and connect with. All right, next page in the book I'm going to refer to, page 102. Now this is going to be me telling you, do not do this. All right, so page 102 talks about templates for drafting, and it talks about giving your reader just an overview. Okay, in narrative, we typically don't do that. Okay, in storytelling, we don't say this story is going to be about how I learned to read and write. That is not narrative style writing. Okay, so the templates really won't work well for our essay. So this is a story about when I learned to read and write. Well, we know this. It's a literacy narrative. Or the time and place of my story are blank and blank. You don't need to show that up front. Spill those details out throughout the story as we need to know them. Okay? The climax of these events was. No, let the climax speak for itself. Don't announce it. Okay? So I'm going to tell you to basically ignore everything on page 102. Those templates don't work effectively for the type of narrative that we're writing. All right, one more thing I want to visit on page 107. And this speaks very clearly to not using templates. About halfway down the page, it says, if you let people in your narrative speak for themselves and show what they are thinking, the reader can draw his or her own conclusions. Don't shove your message down our throat. Okay? Don't tell us that literacy is a very important skill for life. We're all in college. We know that. Okay? Don't tell us, because of this experience, I now know how important reading and writing is. Let the experience, let the details show that to us. All right? So don't shove anything down our throats. Don't tell us things we already know. Okay? Let your story really speak for itself. And hopefully some of the techniques from the quotes of last week's discussion board will help you really use that. So, happy writing during week 3. I look forward to reading your drafts. I will be providing feedback on your rough drafts. And if you have any questions or need any help or getting stuck with ideas, feel free to reach out or contact the tutoring center. Okay, have a great week.